Matt the Immortal Brown, a human who has experienced absolute rock bottom and has somehow scratched and clawed his way into performing in a main event in front of an audience of over 11,000 people. The story of Matt Brown goes far beyond that just of a cage fighter. Instead, Matt perfectly embodies what it means to persevere, work hard, and strive to improve not only inside of the cage, but more importantly, outside of it. In situations where most people would have backed down, and I mean most, including myself. If I had to go through even a quarter of what Matt did, then I'd be fucked. But anyways, in situations where most people would have backed down, given up, or honestly even died, Matt, with the help of a little bit of luck, has been able to achieve the absolute unthinkable. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into who the elbow swinging and blue belt sandbagging Matt Brown really is. Matthew Burton Brown was born January 10th, 1981 in a small town in Ohio called Jamestown. How small, you may ask? Where my own school in a small town in Ontario, Canada had over 10 times, 10 times the amount of people than Matt's entire town did. Yup, that's right. Matt's town had a grand total of 200 people in it. Like his father and grandfather at that, Matt was supposed to become a machinist in the local shop. And from the age of 5, this is exactly what he did. And as a matter of fact, by the age of 13, Matt was already better than most of the lifelong employees in his father's own shop. If that doesn't already sound crazy enough, let me put that into context using myself as an example. And I know what you may be thinking, but Daniel, you must have already been an astronaut, landlord, and millionaire by the age of 13. And to be quite honest, that's the complete opposite from the truth. To be 100% transparent, I was actually a billionaire by the age of 13. No, actually, the only thing I was better at than some 40-year-olds was casting fireballs in World of Warcraft and quickscoping noobs in Modern Warfare. Nothing of actual substance and value. So yeah, back to Matt. Clearly, he was a special and smart kid with tons of potential. Matt would continue down this path into his teenage years and would eventually grow extremely frustrated and angry with his situation. He didn't want to be stuck in a small town in Ohio, or even worse, didn't want to be pigeonholed into becoming a machinist just like his father. He wanted to do something and become someone, but just didn't exactly know how. And unfortunately, it would be this anger and frustration that would put Matt down a path of self-destruction. You see, after being homeschooled for over 2 years in junior high, Matt would return to high school with no friends, no ability to socialize, and as silly as it sounds, was getting about the same amount of attention from girls as McLovin was in Superbad. Yes, it was that bad. A combination of all these things would continue to fuel Matt's anger. This would eventually begin him to being surrounded with the wrong crowd of people. This crowd would give him a place to channel his anger. Though bad, it was definitely what Matt was looking for. He did say, though, he never really felt like he fit into the crowd, but the metal music, drugs, and alcohol definitely provided him with a good escape. On a fun little side note, well, actually maybe not so fun since it involves someone getting fucking murdered. But anyways, on a side note, since we brought up metal music, I thought it would be interesting to point out that Matt actually attended the Pantera concert when Vinnie Paul, the lead drummer of the band, was shot dead on stage. Yeah, pretty fucking crazy if you ask me, huh? Anyways, Matt would continue to hang around this crowd, regularly doing cocaine, meth, and even a tiny little bit of heroin. Like most people say, once you start, you just can't stop. And that was the exact story for Matt Brown. After only his 5th or 6th time of doing heroin, Matt injected an amount so great that he actually overdosed. And he was legit pronounced dead at one point. But through some act of God, Buddha, or maybe even Dana White himself, Matt survived to tell the tale. However, this incident wasn't actually the turning point in Matt's life. Though many people credit it as though, since it's how he developed his nickname as the Immortal One, it wouldn't prove to be a turning point at all. Instead, after his overdose, Matt would leave the hospital saying to himself, well, I guess I'm never doing that again, but hey, let's go do some coke. Needless to say, his days of addiction were not over and his main addiction of meth was still running rampant. It wouldn't be until a trip to the jail where Matt would begin to truly come clean. However, after this time, Matt would see himself bouncing around from friends' sofas, living on the streets, to even living with a pregnant, drug addict lady at one point. Yes, that's true. I mean, I even thought about making a joke about that at one point, but fuck me, I could not imagine. Moving on, Matt would actually get his first taste of MMA when he somehow got a hold of an old Ken Shamrock VHS tape and drunkenly trained some knee bars and toe holds on some friends. How they didn't pop some shit out of their sockets or tear something is beyond me. I mean, I'll have one drink, take 2 steps, stub all my toes, fall down the stairs, and somehow wind up with a DUI. Either way, on a cocaine-fueled trip to see one of his good friends fight, Matt would somehow wind up in the octagon himself. After hearing that it costed only $30 to fight and that the champion needed a challenger, Matt stepped in without ever training a day in his life. Of course, Matt came out with a victory that night, and finished that fight, to be specific, via calf cramps of all things. Yes, I'm not making this up. The champion at the time legit tapped out due to having severe calf cramps. Crazy, right? Either way, Matt would see himself fighting again that same night, but would this time get the shit beaten out of him. But this wouldn't discourage Matt. You see, he would see himself fighting once again 2 weeks after signing up at a local Japanese BJJ gym. And unfortunately for him, he got the shit beaten out of him once again, and even worse at that. But it would be then when Matt would acknowledge that he had finally found somewhere good to channel all of his anger, and would leave all of his bad habits and addictions behind in order to pursue fighting. Matt would go on to make his pro debut in 2005 against Ricardo Martinez. He would actually finish the fight via neck crank and would go on to knock out his following opponent. However, things weren't always smooth sailing for the Immortal One. In just a matter of months, he would go from a record of 2-0 to a record of 3-3. But before we go any further in the career of Matt Brown, I want to shout out some of these promotions that he was actually fighting in. And if you know any of these, then you are an OG and give yourself a pat on the back. Anyways, Matt would fight in Broken Reflection, High Power Fighting, International Fighting, CTIC, and some company called the UFC. I mean, that was later on in his career, but I think I've actually heard of that company before. Matter of fact, is that the company that pays their fighters with a pat on the back and a bag of potato chips? It wouldn't be long after going 3-3 that Matt would self-admittedly have the most difficult fight in his career. In ISCF, Matt would go up against the future Bellator champion Douglas Lima, going on to say that Lima's kicks were something that he had never felt before in his life. Also, prior to the Lima fight, Matt would go up against Matt Arroyo on less than 24 hours notice. The story goes that he was actually taking one of the girls he coached to one of her fights when he overheard that the promotion needed a welterweight challenger. So Matt did what he does and stepped in and got the big victory. Matt would continue to regularly fight, seemingly winning and losing equally as much though. However, with a record of 7-6, the UFC would give Matt a chance to showcase his skills on The Ultimate Fighter. There, he would pick up 2 quick finishes, but unfortunately lose in the quarterfinals to the future winner Amir Sadola. However, I think most of us remember Matt for the complete opposite of what the show was intended for. Take a look.
Hey Jeremy, I heard what you did with my lime juice. You don't with another man's fight. That's okay though, cause you're the next fight. You start getting ready now. I was gonna fight you anyway, but now I got a better reason.
It was a joke, man. It's not like I did something that was gonna hurt you.
I mean, are we tight like that? Huh? Are we tight like that? Like we joke around?
I thought we could be, but apparently you don't want to be.
You ready to see this?
After the show, Matt would continue to fight in the UFC. Though, like his amateur career, he wasn't able to string together a big series of wins for the most part of his career. He would win a few, lose a few, win one and lose one, and so forth. Although I will say, if there's anything in common between a submission and knockout artists like Matt and myself, is definitely that we both finish quick. That was bad. Either way, at UFC 143, after picking up a quick win, Matt would string together a series of wins like never before. After finishing everything in his way, well, except for John Howard, of course, Matt would see himself on a 7-fight win streak and fighting in a title eliminator against the ruthless Robbie Lawler. Like many of us know, Robbie would go on to beat Matt via unanimous decision. This would prove to be the peak of Matt's career. He had become the best version of himself, stringing and putting every part of his game together, and fell just 1 win short of getting a chance to fight for UFC gold. Unfortunately for him, one of the best welterweights in UFC history was standing in his way and stole his spotlight. Though Matt did still pick up some pretty notable wins after this. A nice win over Tim Means and a massive knockout over the Joshua Fabia prospect Diego Sanchez. To recap, Matt Brown's life and career definitely shows us that anything is possible. In situations where nothing is going your way, you can always remember to strive and look forward to a better tomorrow. He's a living embodiment of the saying, "It ain't over until it's over." He had one of the most exciting careers in UFC history and is definitely a guy that I wouldn't want drunkenly training knee bars and heel hooks on me, for goodness sakes. But yeah, that's Matt Brown, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Adios.